Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, we can have everybody come inside that's standing in the hallways. Inshallah, please come inside. Jazakumullahu khairan. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala Sayyidina wa Nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. We are speaking about the battle of Al-Ahzab, or the battle of Al-Khandaq, which is the battle of the trench. And we, in our last session, we covered the portion of when the Confederates, the Ahzab, why they're called that, because they're literally groups, Ahzab, that came together, multiple groups, and they finally come together, and they have reached Medina, 4,000 from the Quraysh, 6,000 from the Ghatafan, which was an ally, or they had temporarily had a coalition with the Quraysh. And we spoke about how the Muslims were 3,000 in number. We spoke about how they were caught, meaning the Ghatafan and Quraysh were caught by surprise because they saw the trench. And this was something foreign to them. This was something that they had no idea of. So after some time, when they're waiting to see what the Muslims will do, basically, Huyay ibn Akhtab, he was the one that cut the deal eventually and convinced the Banu Qurayza, the only remaining Jewish tribe in Medina, to turn on the Muslims. And so they broke the treaty. This was the last of the three tribes. The first two broke their treaty, and now the third one, they betrayed the Muslims and they cut off their treaty. And we had stopped here. So when the Prophet ﷺ, he received the news that Banu Qurayza have broken the treaty, this is a shock to the Prophet ﷺ, and it's a shock to the Muslims. Because, and the way the Quran presents it is so accurate, because Allah Azza wa Jalla says, إِذْ جَاءُوكُم مِّن فَوْقِكُمْ وَمِنْ أَسْفَلَ مِنْكُمْ. Literally, it means when they came above you and below you. That's what it literally means. But as Ibn Ashur rahimahullah, he says that this is the most eloquent way to put it, because when a person is something is about to happen to him, you're going to say, don't move, because if you move, something will fall on your head. And don't move because underneath you, the ground is not stable. So from both sides, something will hit you from the top, or something from the bottom can destroy you. So إِذْ جَاءُوكُم مِّن فَوْقِكُمْ, it's an expression to say, outside of the trench, outside of Medina, they're already there. They're 10,000 in number. Then وَمِنْ أَسْفَلَ مِنْكُمْ, then back where your homes were. And who remembers where the women and children are during this whole thing? The forts, yes, very good. In one of the forts, the Prophet ﷺ has placed them there. So they're in one of the forts, and a fort is secure, but it's only as secure as it can be without any guard, right? Now you have maybe 1,000, maybe 1,500 of the Banu Qurayza inside Medina, and you're quite a distance off on the outskirts, nearing the outskirts of Medina, where they've dug the Khandaq. So what do? How do you fight from there, and then how do you fight back home where your kids, your family are? And so naturally, and this is what happens, where Allah Azza wa Jal, in the battle of Badr and Uhud, He set this principle down, that مَا كَانَ اللَّهُ لِيَذَرَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ عَلَى مَا أَنْتُمْ عَلَيْهِ حَتَّى يَمِيزَ الْخَبِيثَ مِنَ الطَّيِّبِ. That these are the opportunities, these are the chances, these are the events where Allah pulls aside purity from filth. Those that are pure in their faith, they're separated because they stand firm. Those that are shaky, those that are hypocrites, they have nifaq in their hearts, that's when they show their true colors. And so even though the believers, Allah Azza wa Jal also says, they also began to think about things, it's natural. وَتَظُنُّونَ بِاللَّهِ الظُّنُونَ, that you began to think all sorts of thoughts. And Allah says, هُنَالِكَ ابْتُلِيَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ, that it was a test, it was a trial, it wasn't easy for the believers. وَزُلْزِلُوا زِلْزَالًا شَدِيدًا, and literally they were shaken. Right? Zilzal being the term used for earthquakes, it's as if your very essence is shaken to your core. So think about what you have to go through, and you're worried about your families back home, and you don't know what to do. You're already, the weather is cold, it's winter, there's scarcity of food in the city, times are tough. What exactly do you do? But the believers, they and the munafiqun were different, because the munafiqun, and of them Aws ibn Qaydi, he was a munafiq. He was the first who came and he started this trend, and he said, Ya Rasulullah, inna buyutana awra. And Allah verbatim quotes him in the Quran. Inna buyutana awra. Our houses are literally awra. Awra, as we know it, is what you're supposed to cover, right? The nakedness of your body, because if it's exposed, you cover it. That's why it's called awra, right? Nobody likes to walk around with their awra exposed. Inna buyutana awra, our houses are exposed. And we're afraid, we don't know what's going to happen, so let us go. And so the Prophet ﷺ would let them go. And Allah says, وَمَا هِيَ بِعَوْرَةٍ إِن يُرِيدُونَ إِلَّا فِرَارًا. That's not what it's about. It's about the fact that they're using this to run away, to flee. إِن يُرِيدُونَ إِلَّا فِرَارًا. They want to flee. These are cowards. These are munafiq, they're hypocrites. And so they began to flee. And some of the believers would ask permission too, but it was different. You could tell. And the end of Surah An-Nur, Allah Azza wa Jal talks about this. إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِاللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ فَإِذَا اسْتَأْذَنُوكَ لِبَعْضِ شَأْنِهِمْ فَأْذَنْ لِمَنْ شِئْتَ مِنْهُمْ وَاسْتَغْفِرْ لَهُمُ اللَّهِ. Meaning, those from the believers, after a long description, they also seek permission. And there was one companion who was newly married. And it's a very sad incident. He's counted from those that were at Khandaq, because he was newly married and he wanted to go home. He said, Ya Rasulullah, I'm newly married, I have a new wife, I want to go home, I want to see how things are. And the Prophet ﷺ would allow him to go back, but he went back once to check on his wife, and she was standing outside. And he was kind of worried, and he almost said to her, he almost got angry, and he threw his spear, not in a combatant way, but the blunt edge of it at her, saying that, what are you doing outside the house? Realizing the implication that the Banu Qurayza have turned on us. Any moment someone could come, they could kill you, they could take you. Understanding the situation, and she did not understand that situation. Probably that's what he thought, but she said, no, I'm standing out here because I have nowhere to go, because there's a snake inside our house. And so he said, what are you talking about? He said, let me see. And so when he went, and he saw there was a huge snake in the room. And he attempted to kill that snake, but the snake bit him in the process, and so he died from that snake bite. And this was so he's a shaheed, he's considered from those that participated at Khandaq for that reason. So the believers would also go back and check. And the Prophet ﷺ, he had dispatched two groups. They would take turns to go and protect the forts, because now you need a part of the army there as well. And so it would either be 200 men with Salamah ibn Aslam, or 300 with Zayd ibn Haritha. They would take turns. So one group goes, the other comes back. And the Prophet ﷺ instructed them, say the takbir out loud. Because if the Banu Qurayza, they hear your Allahu Akbar, they'll know that people are there guarding the forts, guarding the women, and guarding the children and the elderly. And so they would go and they would protect. Of those incidents that happened during this time, while there was no one at guard, is that one of the Jews from Banu Qurayza, he found out that there is no one at guard at the forts. And so he came in trying to look for a way into the fort. Safiya, this is not Safiya, the wife of the Prophet ﷺ, and she is not married to him at this point. This is Safiya, his aunt. Yes, his aunt, his paternal aunt. His father's sister is Safiya. Safiya binti Abdul Muttalib. She says that I was there in the fort, and I saw, peeking out from the fort, I saw a man wielding his armor and his sword, and the only man I found close to me was Hassan ibn Thabit. So I said to Hassan, I'd go and take care of him. He's here. You know what's happened with the Banu Qurayza. At this point, They've broken the treaty and he's here to kill us. So Hassan said, مَا أَنَا بِصَاحِبِكُمْ. I'm not the man for this. And this is taken usually, and it's made to criticize Hassan and say that Hassan was a coward, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, which unfortunately some Muslims also, they may have read this or they may have seen this due to just reading into it, that why would Hassan not respond? And so Hassan, he said, مَا أَنَا بِصَاحِبِكُمْ, I can't do it. So Safiya said, and you can see the strength of the Muslim women, Safiya said, I'll take care of it. So she says, فَأَخَذْتُ عَمُودًا. She said, I saw a piece of metal lying there, and I took it with me, and I tied my waistband, meaning I tied my clothes tight. In other words, when you say you get ready for it, and I said, let me take care of this man. So she said, I went out, and I stuck from a side until I struck him on his head, and he fell down from that wound, and he died on the spot. And I said to Hassan, when I came back, that now go and take his armor. Meaning he's died now, so you can take his animal, take his armor. And he said, I don't need it. There's no need for me in it. I'm okay. And so this shows the bravery of Safiya. But Ibn Ishaq, he comments and he says, it's not that Hassan was a coward. Because firstly, why would Hassan be back with the elderly, the kids, and the women, if he was capable to fight? Because every man was there. The Prophet ﷺ would rebuke such a person. Secondly, and this is the most important point, if Hassan was not only a poet, but specifically, he would engage in hija or haju, meaning writing poetry, saying poetry that specifically attacks the Prophet's opponent ﷺ. If that was the case, the poetry from the other side, which we also have, if you open up Ibn Ishaq, Ibn Hisham, Ibn Sa'ad, Tabaqat, you'll find the poetry against, and this is the Muslims, they narrated it as well, against Hassan as well. But you don't find him being mentioned as a coward. And so Ibn Ishaq says, when the Prophet ﷺ came to Medina, Hassan was 60. So how old is Hassan now at Khandaq? 74. Well, that would mean that from the Hijrah to Khandaq is 14 years. But the Prophet ﷺ was only in Medina for how many years? For 10. So it can't be 74. 60, 66, 70. Well, 70 would mean this is the last year of the Prophet's life. 64, close, 65, because Khandaq is in the 5th year after the Hijrah, so 65. So obviously he's a 65-year-old man. Now it's true, many of the warriors are fighting in their 60s, but 65 is still an old age. And one person that's 65 can be very different from another person that's 65. Like our Mumtaz uncle, he's working up on 80, but he can take many of us here. So not every 65-year-old is as strong or as physically able as another 65. Just as how every 25 is not necessarily physically capable as a 25. People get sick, other issues come up. So Hassan, the correct answer is that Hassan wasn't a coward. They would have attacked him for that. Hassan was from the elderly. Hence, it was the elderly, the children and the women. But because he was still a man, Safiya still told him that, go, and he was not able to go. And she did not take his armor because she said, I don't want to touch the body of a man even though he's dead. This was from her Haya radiyallahu anha. And so with that, there's now a group of the Muslims under Zayd ibn Haritha or under Salamah ibn Aslam there. And then there's a group, the vast majority except for the few hundred, that are fighting there. And now that the siege is long, basically it's a waiting game. Because the Ghatafani Quraysh, they're satisfied that we have the Banu Qurayza from inside, we just have to wait it out. And so obviously they can't cross the trench, and so they waited out, but there were some minor skirmishes that were happening. But before that, the Prophet ﷺ, he realized that the situation has reached the point where there is literally no way that he can see. Although he has tawakkul on Allah, and that's why when he was told that Banu Qurayza have defected, what did he say? He said, Abshiru بِفَتْحٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ, that have glad tidings that victory will come from Allah. So he has that, but at the same time you have to take the means. So what do? So he contacted the Ghatafan, and he sent a messenger to them saying that, what if we made a deal? Because you know that you're not here because you actually oppose the Muslims. The Ghatafan don't care. They don't care about the Muslims. They don't care about the Prophet ﷺ. They have nothing with the Muslims. They're there as hired mercenaries. That's what the Quraysh, and that's what the Banu Qaynuqa' made their agreement was upon. That will give you half of Khaybar's produce. So they're there for the money. So the Prophet ﷺ said, we'll give you a third of Medina's produce. And they were negotiating in the middle of that. And the Prophet ﷺ, he called the Ansar. And he called Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh and Sa'ad ibn Ubadah. Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh from the Aus, Sa'ad ibn Ubadah from the Khazraj. He called them and he said, look, this is what they're saying. And I'm in talks with them. What do you all say? And listen to Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh's response. قال يا رسول الله أمرا تحبه فتصنعه أم شيئا أمرك الله به لا بد من العمل به أم شيئا تصنعه لنا. Look at the detail and look at their relationship with the Prophet ﷺ. He said, Ya Rasulullah, أمرا تحبه, is this something that you like to do? Meaning you personally see there to be a benefit in it? And that's why you're doing it? أم شيئا أمرك الله به, or is this something that Allah has commanded you to do? Because then we can't say anything if Allah has commanded you to do it. سمعا وطاعة. And even if you want to do it and Allah has not commanded you, still, because the Prophet ﷺ wants to do it, we're going to be with you. أم شيئا تصنعه لنا, or is it something you're doing just for us, for our convenience, for our protection? And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, بل شيء أصنعه لكم. This is something I'm doing for you and your people. And specifically, he said, والله ما أصنع ذلك إلا لأنني رأيت العرب رمتكم عن قوس واحدة. The only reason I'm doing this is because I see that all of the Arab have gathered and they're about to hit you with the same bow. على قوس واحدة, meaning the Ghatafan and the Quraysh are holding hands together. وكالبوكم من كل جانب. They've come to you from all sides. فأردت أن أكسر عنكم من شوكتهم إلى أمر ما. Maybe I thought I'd make things easy for you because you didn't sign up for this. And so Sa'ad bin Mu'adh said, Ya Rasulullah, قد كنا نحن وهؤلاء القوم على الشرك بالله وعبادة الأوثان لا نعبد الله ولا نعرفه وهم لا يطمعون أن يأكلوا منها ثمرة إلا قرا أو بيعا. Ya Rasulullah, before you, we've had a relationship with these people. And these are a people of shirk and we were a people of shirk. These were a people that worshipped idols and we worshipped idols. We didn't know Allah and they didn't know Allah. But they never dared to take something from us except qiran. Qiran means يعني من باب إقراء الضيف, يعني to honor your guest, except that if you were hosted, or a bay'a, meaning you traded and bought for it. In other words, we weren't at this level of cowardice before Islam, when we were mushriks. What do you think? أَفَحِينَ أَكْرَمَنَا اللَّهُ بِالْإِسْلَامِ وَهَدَانَا لَهُ وَأَعَزَّنَا بِكَ وَبِهِ نُعْطِيهِمْ أَمْوَالَنَا. That, Ya Rasulullah, now when Allah has honored us with you and with Islam, and He's guided us, are we now going to turn and give up our wealth like this? وَاللَّهِ مَا لَنَا بِهَذَا مِنْ حَاجَةٍ. Wallahi, we don't need it. لا نعطيهم إلا السيف حتى يحكم الله بيننا وبينهم فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أنت وذاك. And they said, Ya Rasulullah, the only thing we're willing to do is fight until Allah rules between us. In other words, we weren't cowards before Islam when we were mushriks. What's going to make us cowards now when we are Muslims and we're going to give up on you and on these people that are here against you? And so the Prophet ﷺ, he said, then that's your call. And this would be a very emotional moment for the Prophet ﷺ later on, as we'll see, because these would be some of the last words Sa'ad bin Mu'adh would say, and the long relationship the Prophet ﷺ has had with him. This being the ending, it makes it one of the saddest incidents. So, With that, the talks for any type of negotiation were over and actual fighting began. But the fighting was weak because no one would cross over. It's a trench. But one group made it through. And this group was led by Amr ibn Wood. Amr ibn Wood. Amr ibn Wood was known as the most fierce warrior from Quraysh. And they say that Ibn Ishaq says he was 90 at that time. And he was still known as the most fierce fighter even though he was 90. And on the day of Badr, he was the one that fought the most bravely from the Quraysh side, and he was hurt. Most likely by Hamzah radiallahu anh, he was injured. So he never got a chance to come at Uhud because he was recovering from that wound. But when he came for Khandaq, he came mu'lama, he came with a sign, meaning similar to how Abu Dujana, we read about him at Uhud, that they would tie or they would put something which they'd call that this is my call of death, that it's all or nothing now, I'm here to go all the way. And so he came and he was the first of those that crossed forward, and he stopped his men. They found a path through the trench and he said, stop here. He said, Al-Biraz, that a duel has to take place. So send us your best. And so the Prophet ﷺ said, this is Amr. Who's going to stand up to Amr? And so nobody stood up, except for Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu. So he said, Ana lahu ya Rasulullah. He said, Ya Rasulullah, I'll take care of him. The Prophet ﷺ said, Ijlis fa innahu Amr. Sit down because this is Amr. Don't you know who this is? This is Amr. And he sat down. And then the Prophet ﷺ said it a second time. And Ali said, Ana lahu ya Rasulullah. Ya Rasulullah, I'm here, I'm ready. And the Prophet said, Ijlis fa innahu Amr. Sit down, it's Amr. Don't you know? And then a third time. And after the third time, the Prophet didn't say stand. The Prophet said, come here. He took off his turban and he put his turban on Ali and he gave him his sword and he said, Allahumma a'inhu, O Allah, aid and be with Ali. And so Ali said, I went. And when Amr saw me, he said, who are you? And I said, I'm the son of Abu Talib. So he laughed at me, meaning he mocked Ali, saying, you're just a kid, what are you going to do? And knowing the background, he said, your father and me used to drink together, meaning you're not my match. بل أسأل من أعمامكم. I'm asking from your uncles, meaning people that are above you. And Ali said, I'm not going anywhere, I'm here in front of you. Important for this bravery. So Ali said, off. The sign of the Arab, and the Prophet ﷺ, he forbade this because he said, what's the fault of the horse? You can't just kill an animal. من غير غرض. You can't just kill an animal without a purpose. Meaning the animal can only be killed if it's harming you and you're protecting yourself, or if you're hunting it, for example. You can't just get up and kill an animal. So he got up, he slaughtered his horse, and this was a sign that I'm burning my ship, my horse is done, come face me one-on-one. And so Ali pulled out his shield and he said, Amr struck me first, and he struck me so hard that it went through my shield. So I tossed my shield, and then he came at me, I couldn't recover. He came at me a second time and he nearly got me on my head. فَشَجَّ رَأْسِي. And so he got a part of my head. And so I drew my sword, and with one slash, Ali hit his neck, and he said, Amr fell down right there. And people were in such shock that this is Amr ibn Wood. And this is Ali, he's a kid still. Meaning he's a teenager, he's a young boy. And Ali said, as I looked at him, the Muslimun, they said, Allahu Akbar. And all of them, the Mushrikun, they ran back. Ikrimah running to the point where he dropped his sword and he dropped his arrows, and he ran as they ran, and we charged behind them. And this boosted the morale of the Muslims to the point that Ali radiallahu anh was chasing them and reading لا تعجلن فقد أتاك مجيب صوتك غير عاجز. That don't hurry, you're here to fight me, but Ali's come, the one who's going to respond to your challenges. So where are you running off to? And so they ran off, and this solidified the Muslims. Of those skirmishes that happened was a man by the name of Nawfal ibn Abdullah. And this shows how even at this strenuous moment of war, he basically tried to cross the Khandaq, and Zubayr ibn al-Awam, he cut him down. When he was killed, Nawfal, him, and Amr ibn Wood, the mushrikun, they said, listen, we were fighting, we know that, but these are two of our most noble men. So we'll pay you 10,000 dirhams, but let us take their body. Now, the Muslims could accept the 10,000 dirham, but the Prophet ﷺ, he said, we don't accept money and we don't sell corpses. And even though this is your opponent, the Prophet ﷺ never disrespected, he never mutilated, he didn't do any of that. Because the point is, this person was there trying to kill you. The moment this person is no longer trying to kill you and able to kill you, Islam is not teaching you to be barbaric and then mutilate its body. The Prophet said, we have no need, so take the body. And they took the body and they buried it on their own. Of the things that happened in between these skirmishes was, for the first time, the Prophet ﷺ, he missed 3 salahs, and in some narrations, 4 salahs in a row. So at one point, things got so hard because they were trying to cross the trench, and the Muslims and the Prophet ﷺ would defend. And at one point, it was Dhuhr, Ibn Ishaq's narration, and they couldn't stop to pray. And Asr came in, and they couldn't stop to pray. And then Maghrib came in, and they couldn't stop to pray. So they only prayed at Isha. And in some narrations, it was from Asr, because the Prophet ﷺ said that Mala Allahu quburahum nara, may Allah fill their graves with fire, shagaluna an as-salatil wusta, because they prevented us from as-salatul wusta. So now here the difference of opinion in fiqh comes, in the books of fiqh. What is as-salatul wusta? Wusta basically meaning the middle, and salah being salah. So what is the middle salah? Depends on what you think is the first salah. Is Dhuhr the first salah? Because Jibreel alayhi salam, or it could be, because Jibreel alayhi salam, when he came, he started with Dhuhr. So Dhuhr could be the first salah. Or if you look at it from the day, Fajr could be, and then it could be Asr. It could be, so that's why there's almost an opinion that says it could be any of the 5. But most of the scholars, they say it's Salatul Asr, because it seems from most narrations, he missed Asr first, and then he missed Maghrib. So he said, شَغَلُونَ عَنِ الصَّلَاةِ الْوُسْطَى. And so he, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he gathered afterwards, late in the night, when things had calmed down. He gathered and he told Bilal, give the iqamah, and then he prayed with them, bit-tartib. So he prayed Asr, and then Maghrib. Or he prayed Dhuhr, and then Asr, and then Maghrib. So we learn from that, actually, if you miss your salah, you make it up in that order. And he didn't start with the Isha first. So you did his Asr and Maghrib, or he did his Dhuhr, Asr and Maghrib, unless obviously your salahs that you've missed have become so many that you're unable to do that. If it's an unreasonable amount, that's different, then you leave it. But if it's a reasonable amount, you start with the first salah. And this also teaches us an important lesson that in the midst of all of this, the Prophet ﷺ, he's so upset that he's making dua against them because he missed his salah. In the midst of war. Literally, our excuses for missing salah don't even come close to that, right? What is our excuse for missing salah? But he was so upset, he said, شَغَلُونَ عَنِ الصَّلَاةِ الْوُسْطَى. They stopped us and prevented us from praying. So there's a lesson about the importance of salah even here. With all of this going on, this total siege and this minor skirmishes maybe lasted, this was about day 21 or day 22. So 3 weeks and more. And what happened is that when the Muslims at this point, they have no idea what's going to happen. And that's one of the strange things about this whole battle is that it's, and if you zoom out, it's a whole lesson on tawakkul, on reliance and how Allah can help you from any direction possible. And so a man randomly comes to the Muslims and he says, his name is Nu'aym ibn Mas'ud. He actually narrates the story himself. He became a Muslim. He said, Ya Rasulullah, I'm here on behalf of Ghatafan, and I'm here because Allah put something in my heart and I'm ready to become a Muslim. And Nu'aym says, before I had met the Prophet ﷺ, I had some dealings with the Prophet ﷺ. And so the Prophet ﷺ said, he welcomed him and he said, what can I do for the Muslims? And the Prophet said, see if you can play for the Muslims in a positive way. And so he said, Ya Rasulullah, allow me, do you give me permission? And the Prophet said, Inna al-harba khuda. War is, you can say technique, or war is all about plotting. You don't want to say deceit, because the Prophet ﷺ never allowed breaking an agreement or betraying in war. But he did allow a person to bend the truth somewhat and make a person think something while they're thinking something else. Basically, you're saying, I'm walking this way, but you walk that way. That much the Prophet ﷺ allowed in war. It's not that and that's not even sanctioned outside of war, only in the state of war. And so Nu'aym said that I had good connections with the people with the Banu Qurayza. So I went to them and I said, listen, I'll tell you what, analyzing this whole situation, and I am from Ghatafan, the Quraysh and Ghatafan aren't sincere. Now he's not lying. He's saying, and I'll tell you how. You can know if they're sincere. I'm going to give you a way. Ask the Ghatafan and Quraysh to give you 200 men to keep as hostages. Basically as a guarantee that they're not going to leave. Because you have to stay here because your family and kids and women are here. Their family isn't here. Their kids, their wealth, their homes aren't here. They can leave. If they get a chance, they'll attack. If not, they'll leave. And he wasn't entirely wrong. Tell them to give you a token of security. Look, we're here with you. And he went to the Quraysh and he said, look, how do you know that the Jews won't turn on you? They turned on Muhammad, didn't they? They could turn on you too. So why don't you find a way to get them to convince you that they're sincere? And he went to the Ghatafan and he said, both of them are not sincere. That the Banu Qurayza are not sincere and the Quraysh aren't sincere, and he wasn't wrong in that either. In reality, none of them were sincere. And so he pitted the three of them against one another. And so the Banu Qurayza, and he told the Quraysh, he said, when the Banu Qurayza send for you and they say, give us 200 men, you can know that they aren't going to trust you, because if they trusted you, they won't ask for 200 men. So lo and behold, after some time, the Banu Qurayza sent a messenger and they said, we need 200 men. And Abu Sufyan said, that's it. That's it. They're asking for our men now. And he went back and he said, well, what did Abu Sufyan say? He said, well, he's not giving us 200 men. So he said, that's it. They don't trust us, so they're not giving us their men. So each side lost trust in each side, but the reality is each side was already deceitful, right? And so Abu Sufyan, he said, if we want to make sure that all three of us are on the same page, tomorrow we're going to strike at dawn. Full on attack, we live or die, we'll cross the trench today. And when Abu Sufyan sent that message, it was the evening of Saturday. And so it was the what? Somebody, world religions. So what happened on Saturday? The Sabbath. Because they're Jews, right? So they said, today is the day, Yawm as-Sabt, today is the Sabbath, we can't fight. It's the day of Saturday. So they sent for Abu Sufyan. Abu Sufyan said, what is this nonsense? What are you talking about, the day of Saturday? It's just a day, Yawmun ka-ayyamikum. It's just a day out of days. And he's called Huyay ibn Akhtab. He said, Huyay, what is this? Huyay said, no, this is, the concept of the Sabbath was not there. The Quraysh did not know. He said, this is the one day that we can't fight. And it so happened, the day picked to fight by Abu Sufyan was Saturday. And so he said, you know what, I don't believe any of this. This is pure treachery. You're making up this thing about a day being there. We're going to attack today. Well, let's see if they come. If they're true and sincere, they'll show up and they'll come. And we'll stop here, inshallah, and we'll continue from here next Monday, bi'Illahi ta'ala. Wa sallallahu wa sallam baraka ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Inshallah, just quickly, we have our prize draw today. And this is once again for those youth 21 and under that come every Monday, and you checked in the QR code, you checked in, you filled out the form every Monday of the month for September. So we have a little prize for you. From the girls for this month's winner is Sahar Ghannam. Sahar Ghannam. You can collect your prize with Sister Afnan upstairs. And from the boys is Muhammad Rayhan. Muhammad, mashallah. Mashallah. Takbir. Takbir. MashaAllah. So we have an AirPods, and we have a beautiful book on the Seerah, Nurul Uyun. It's one of the most well authenticated, very short and concise Seerah, beautiful work in just a few 70 or 80 pages to get an overview of the Seerah, inshallah. So congratulations to them. May Allah accept. And all those that missed out, you can try for next month, inshallah, and maybe you'll get a chance. And as always, we have pizza downstairs. So inshallah, please do make your way downstairs. Gently, without running, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairah.